friends and familiars. This is Matt Orozco here from Macabre Daily, and I'm joined today by writer and director Will Canon, whose recent film, The Confession, is now out on VOD. You can watch it wherever you can get a digital access. And Will is no stranger to genre. He co-wrote and directed the 2015 film Demonic, and as such, we're bulking him back to the horror fray. So, Will, thank you so much for spending some time to speak today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Matt.
It's a pleasure. And as our writer Stephen remarked, he truly enjoyed The Confession, and I did as well. Genuinely a film that I think is a bit deceiving as far as the looks go, because you think you get one thing, and it's so much more than that. Kind of like I hate to use the Shrek analogy of an onion, but it definitely has layers. So fantastic work, and
Thank you.
congratulations on the release.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for both of those things. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Now, before I get into the confession explicitly, I just be curious to know a little bit more about your history with genre. At what point did you realize that you're a horror fan?
Honestly, probably like college. I wasn't really allowed to watch scary movies growing up. And I didn't come from a family that was like a big movie family or big TV family. Like we didn't watch a lot of TV together. Like I have friends that like grew up watching every Tuesday night we're watching this show, we're watching that show. And it just wasn't my family. And so like I grew up in the 80s, but like a lot of the sort of classic 80s horror films that like I heard about growing up and knew the bad guys of and knew the names. I didn't really watch until like college, but I think it's kind of a cliche, but like everybody's, two favorite horror films are like The Exorcist and The Shining, and I watched both of those when I was like 19, 20, and just had just very sort of like memorable experiences with both films. And The Shining I actually watched at a film festival with Shelley Duvall introing it, and then we watched a 35 millimeter print. So like that was the first
Wow.
way I experienced that movie. So, but it was like I think it was college when I was like, oh, there's a whole genre out here that like I really love and just wasn't really allowed to watch.
That's fast, because it's like almost like you didn't know what you liked until you saw it.
Yeah,
Um, and I definitely resonate with the, not coming from a family that like made movie watching a hobby of theirs, because I certainly my parents are divorced, so that already created some tension, but also the that just wasn't like the thing we do. We'd be like, oh,
yeah.
we're gonna go out and do something perhaps, but I think movies were always an escape. And so what was the precipice for you seeing those movies? Was it an assignment from a class, or was it just on a whim you said, yeah, I'm gonna go rent The Exorcist tonight?
What I did was I kind of like I had been a fan sort of movies, kind of discovering them on my own, like in high school, kind of once you have like some autonomy, like
Yeah.
I really got into movies and did a lot of stuff just on my own, like with like video cameras, making little shorts and stuff. And then I'm trying to think of what like I think I was about 19 when I said I want to be a filmmaker. I want to go to film school because that was kind of the only path I could like wrap my head around at that point. Um, and so what I did was once I sort of made that decision, I went and got like AFI had just done their like top 100 movies of all time. And so I just went and got that list and just started knocking those movies off like one at a time. And like that was kind of my first sort of like film school kind of experience, which is going through those. And then I think like, there's certain filmmakers I'd never heard of. So like once you watch The French Connection and you're like, whoa, that's amazing. And you're like, what else did, Friedkin do? So I think that was probably the way I discovered it. Either that or it was just I just knew that that was a classic movie. I mean, that's obviously such a movie that's just in the cultural, atmosphere. So I think it was either probably from French Connection was sort of the bridge to it, or just having heard of it. Because there were also films that weren't on that list that were obviously such big cultural movies that I was like, I'm gonna go check this out. So yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's such an exciting time. It's like whenever you discover something that you're really into, those first kind of few years of discovery are so fun because it's all new. And you're
Yes.
like, oh wait, there's more of this? Oh, there's something
Yes.
else like that. And then like you do that for a while, and eventually, to avoid becoming jaded, I think it's important to have a lot of variety. But ultimately, you do start to pick up on tropes and trends, and you're like, okay, I kind of get what they're doing here. But that first, just like music is the same thing. Um, when I first found out about the Clash, I was like, you always think you're the first there. It's like, oh, there was a lot of people here before me.
Yeah.
But then you find out about the Dead Kennedys, you find out about the Ramones, like the Misfits. So it just kind
Yeah.
of becomes this kind of really fun journey. And of course, that brings us to the confession, right? This is a what were some of the impetuses or kind of origins of you thinking about this story and wanting to bring it to screen?
The first thing was the idea of the discovery of the box. That someone would discover this box and this cassette tape, and then hear this sort of confession and hear this idea of like someone's leaving you this dark secret. You don't know if it's real or not. They're not around to explain any of it. Or say, no, 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 that didn't happen. I was having a bad day and whatever it is. That was kind of the first thing that got me excited about it. And then, I'm always like anything that's contained that's a cool idea that you can do contained gets me really excited because it's so hard to make movies, and I kind of in my mind, it's hard. The physical production is hard, but it's just hard to get them made,
Yeah.
like it's hard to find the financing, all that stuff. So if you have an idea that's contained and feels very sort of doable and like it's something you can execute with not a lot of money, to me that just gets me excited because it just feels like there's less stoplights in your way. It just seems like there's just a clear path and um I think too, like it's just when you're trying to make a movie, it's just there's so many no's. It's so easy to get bogged down in that. So if you get excited about something and you feel like look, we could do this. This is achievable. This isn't in space. We don't need $100 million for this. I think it just gives you, like for me, it just gives me kind of a momentum to an excitement about things that I think is really helpful when you're trying to get something made.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're spot on about it's difficult to get a film made, let alone getting it out, getting it seen, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and so I think, and the fact that you kind of have that discipline already in your head of like, I know this needs to be contained, not just because that might be what excites you, but also because consciously or subconscious, like that's going to be the easiest thing to produce is something where we know we only need to shoot in a handful of places. And, if it's, especially if it's existing interiors that we can just adopt, then great. But I don't want to, I also want to acknowledge that like the look of the film is fantastic. And I
Thank
think
you.
one of the things that, has been so impressive about independent productions, particularly in the past 10 years, is just the level of production quality there's just very much a marginal difference at this point between what someone could create on their own versus what the studios are putting out. And in regards to when you were working through the script and the ideas, was there anything that you kind of, as you're revising the draft or even through the shooting process, thinking, I think I have to forgo this because it's either too out of scope or maybe we just can't pull it off within what we put together?
Well, my mind immediately went to there were scenes that we did end up cutting in prep because with the time we had, the trickiest stuff to do was the lake stuff. Like the lake stuff and the sort of like woods were sort of adjacent to that, just in how we were shooting it. It was the same park and um when I looked at the schedule, there was just no way. I think we ended up having a day and a half at the lake, and I think the original schedule we only had a day, and we had more to do there. We had more scenes to shoot there, and the stuff that's in the movie, it was like I really felt like we really kind of accomplished it by the skin of our teeth, Like and in fact, I remember like one of the things we were doing, I won't say too much about it because it's a spoiler, but there's a really important shot in the water. Um, and it's actually the last time you see Italia in the movie. It's the
Okay.
last shot of the water, and we really felt like we only had one take to get it, and we did it, and water splashed up and hit her in the face, and she sort of flinched and she's amazing. But like if it's 52-degree water. If that hits anybody in the face, they're gonna flinch. You know
Right.
what I mean? And it was kind of like, no, we don't have time to do it again. We don't have time to do it again. And the DP and I kind of looked at each other and was like, and I think he said it as we are looking at each other. He's like, this is the end of the movie. And it's like you just can't end it like you can't do that. So anyway, yeah, there were a lot of stuff that was tricky with this sort of size. What we were trying to accomplish with the resources we had, we had to be really kind of disciplined and a little bit clever about how we do it. But I won't go into all the way we refigured everything. But there were a few more scenes that took place there at the sort of end of the second act of the movie that we sort of did kind of reformulate just because it just didn't make sense to, it just didn't make sense to try to go accomplish these days that we just knew we were never gonna make.
Yeah, I think that's the consistent challenge is always just we only have usually, if you're lucky, you've got 2 weeks. Like with
Yeah,
independent productions, most
yeah,
of the time it's either an ad hoc sporadic, like we've got a weekend, let's go do it,
yeah,
or you've
yeah.
got 7 days, get as much as you possibly can get done in those 7 days. But again, I think, the final cut and the edit we get to see, you know, it still tells a very cohesive and very engaging story. And I think one of the things that is most interesting about the Confession is that it brings together so many different ideas from different genres into one narrative that
Mhm.
makes it a little bit more interesting and avoids a lot of the redundancy we see, particularly in the, you know, so potentially possessed child genre, right? It's like
Yeah,
this always
sure.
follows a similar format that The Exorcist has laid, very good groundwork on for many, many years. But was it always your intention to be this kind of genre bending narrative that borrows from elements of sci-fi and horror, or did that come naturally through just the writing process?
I think it was more naturally. It's funny that you mentioned the possessed kid thing in The Exorcist because that was a conscious decision at a point because you think of like possession movies, you think of Friedkin, I was thinking of The Conjuring, the end of The Conjuring. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm like, if you're gonna throw your hat in that ring with William Friedkin and James Wan in these classic movies, you really gotta be able to deliver the goods and with that kind of possession. And that's why the movie goes in a different direction. Because I was like, I'm not gonna do it better than those guys. Not with this, probably not ever, but not with this budget. You know what I mean? I just like
Yeah.
you're not gonna like, I just like that's a losing fight. So that was a conscious decision for me to be like, let's take it in a different direction. And I really thought that was kind of the first thought. And then my second thought was, I think the direction it goes in plays to my strengths better. Like I was just like, okay, I think if we take the third act this way, I think this will be more fun for me. And I think it's more achievable. And I think it just plays to what I like to do. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was like, man, all right, if you're gonna go down the possessed kid, road, you either got to do it really good or you got to kind of go in a new direction on it.
You're totally right. I mean, and I think it's great to have these like foundational films that give us this framework to follow, that become this become an archetype in and of itself. But at the same time, that means over time, the need to either do something different and innovate or make it like I always compare horror movies to grilled cheese sandwiches, and that to make one is it's anyone can make a grilled cheese sandwich, and
Yeah.
I don't want to minimize the role of a filmmaker here, but to say like generally speaking, anyone can make a
I
movie.
thought I thought you were gonna say I didn't want to minimize the role of a grilled cheese sandwich, but
I mean, those two, they're very important parts of not just childhood but life. But to make them really great, right? To make it
yeah,
like this is the best grilled cheese sandwich you've ever had, that's something that becomes increasingly harder over time because everyone's thrown their hat in. You have more hats to look at, and so
yep,
I love when filmmakers take swings, even if like, and in this case, I think they work, but in some cases, we've watched films where they don't work. But
yeah,
nevertheless, we'll always look at that and say, this person's trying to do something different. If it succeeds or not is kind of beside the point of the fact that we didn't. I'd rather see someone do something different that doesn't entirely work than someone do something that's been done before
yeah,
to a level that's either as expected or below because you're
totally,
always going to be compared to, unfortunately, those legacy great films is
yeah,
it's going to be like this. And there's also a strong undercurrent of religion in this, but it's a fascinating portrayal of religion in that we're not give it's shown in a slightly more positive but also far more grounded light than we're typically used to seeing in religious horror. And so I'm curious to know kind of what informed your position there because usually religion is treated like the means to an end, but also this kind of own malevolent force in and of itself. Then we have the character, forgetting the name, is it
Harling,
Harling?
yeah, Harling,
Harling,
yeah.
who is
Terrence
just
Rosemore, yeah,
he's so I just remember the prayer, the shortest prayer, fuck it. Like
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
amazing. So I'm just curious
Yeah.
to know where that comes from.
I mean, honestly, I think it just comes from being around religion my whole life. I mean, I think like I do think that religion and movies, I don't, I think there's been a lot of caricatures of it,
Hmm.
and I think like I think that's the thing, um, and in horror, a lot too. But I think that was the thing for me. I when I watched, I grew up in Texas, so it's a very, there's religion everywhere. Like Bill Moyers, the old journalist, used to joke that like where he grew up in Texas, there were more Baptists than people. You know, and that's kind of that's kind of how I grew up too. And I just think it just comes from like knowing so many people who are people of faith. Um, and seeing how they live their lives for better or worse, I think it just made me wanted to treat the religion in a way that just felt more real to me. You know what I mean? And what I had seen, and then it's fun, I think, to take that grounding and then take it to like take it to like that sort of like genre place, take it to that sort of place where it's not grounded anymore because like we're fighting, entities and demons or whatever, but we're coming at it from a place that's hopefully a little bit more grounded. So no, I think that's cool. I'm glad that you saw it that way. And I don't even know if that was something that was conscious for me. You know what I mean? But it was just sort of like I've seen so many movies where the person talking about God was just so over the top. It just didn't feel like something that I had sort of experienced in real life.
And it's
So,
fascinating to me that, like, I mean, I have not seen every movie ever, but I watch a lot of movies and we watch a lot of religious horror movies, and very few films, regardless of genre, ever treat religion in a practical way. I mean,
mm,
there's even the end of the film even kind of posits the same thing at the beginning, which is like, God's there whether you want him to be or not, and he may or may not be on your side.
yeah,
So, I think that ambiguity of this kind of, it's not by default righteous. It's by
yeah,
default, bigger than us, grander than us, but I think the way that it's treated in terms of just being very much about this is a way of thinking and living your life versus like a set of mandates that end up becoming, superpowers to fight evil. And I think that like that reduction of it being grandiose and being more just pedestrian. Like this is,
yeah,
religion is just this is how the average person receives religion is I believe in something, I'm spiritual, but I'm not going to go so far as to, you know, and in fact, the most extreme religious thing is the baptism scene. But even that is treated with like, yeah, that's not like real baptisms are done this way versus,
right.
So I applaud that because it doesn't. There was a point where I thought to myself, oh, is this going to be like a heavy-handed religious film about how, God is the savior of all things? And by the end, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh no, you've really taken me through like an arc of because I think we're mostly following Ricci's character, right? As like of her, we're
Mhm.
essentially her through this journey of recognizing the role of religion and all of this in our life and in relation to the father. But my last
Well,
question for, go
Well,
ahead.
I was gonna say, I really appreciate that. I feel like with religion, people have just such preconceived ideas, that they bring to it. And so I did find like when I was we didn't do like typical like test screenings, but I would just bring people over to my living room and 10, 12 people at a time and show them the movie and just get feedback. And that was one of the things that was really tricky for us was that I just felt like the baggage that people bring to it was really kind of tough to get around um, and not have them feel like the movie was really saying one thing or the other. I always I never wanted it to be a super didactic like this is the theme, this is what the movie says. I just never wanted it to be like that, but I found it was really tricky to navigate once we had made it. So I'm glad that I appreciate what you're saying because that was kind of my hope.
Yeah, and you hit on a good point that we do bring like our own experiences and expectations to things, whether they're intended or not. So it
Yeah.
does color our interpretation of them. If I was a far more religious person, I might read it as this is a promotion of, And if I
Yeah.
was someone who was, staunchly anti-religion, I might read it as, oh, this looks like it's putting things on a pedestal. So I think it's,
Yeah.
again, that doesn't mean that's what you intend. That means
Yeah.
that whatever my perception is what I'm going to color my view of it of.
That's true. And I actually found that whatever people's perception was, they thought the film was saying the opposite. You know what I mean? It was like I found that like whatever they were bringing, they felt like the film was sort of like against against that, or challenging that, or on the other side of that. So, anyway.
I mean, that's good. I mean, listen, if it's allowing people to, I think we go to movies, one, for entertainment, but also because it allows us to think abstractly and explore themes that maybe we wouldn't have. And movies, the best movies get people talking.
Yeah.
Whether they're saying good things or bad things, they're
Yeah.
having the conversation. And I think that at the end of the day, there's a lot that people can come away from the confession and have a discussion about. It's not like there's nothing wrong with a straightforward story, but things are far more have more evergreen uh, elements to them if you can kind of examine them from different lenses. And
Yeah.
my last question I love to ask, although I've been told it's a little difficult, so apologies in advance,
Uh-oh.
is
All right. I'm gonna gear
if
up for it.
I know I'm context setting here, but if you were asked to program a double feature with The Confession being one of the films,
Oh
what would
man.
you like to make as the second feature?
The second feature. What would be the second feature? I'd probably say The Conjuring. Because I feel like I worked with James Wan before. He was a producer on my second movie, and I feel like there were so many things I learned from him that I brought to this movie. Especially like the just the look of horror, like the look of the look of it and just how to tell a good story. I just learned so much from him. I'd say The Conjuring, and then we actually scouted the Conjuring house for this movie. Like we went out to scout because we shot it in Wilmington, North Carolina, and the house where they did the exteriors for the Conjuring is there. So we scouted it and had this like really, really eerie experience. Because we went, it was like the end of the day, the sun was going down, and it had started to rain, and it was just that wet North Carolina kind of day. And I was shooting like, and my producers were like, can we please get out of here? And I'm like, no, I just wanted a few more pictures, few more pictures. Anyway, so I just feel like there's like something in the DNA of it that like, that like James has his fingerprints on just it's kind of as an influence of mine. So I'd say that would be like my second one.
I mean, the heavy amount of familial melodrama and also the close relationship that the parent and children have to each other is very
Mm,
much akin to The Conjuring. And that's,
yeah,
I think, The Conjuring and like The Confession, they're ghost stories at kind of the core. But what really drives that propels the action isn't the horror so much as the way the characters themselves are changing and
mm,
adapting to it. And I think The Confession is, again, we're watching a mother basically trying to figure out what's going on with her child while also trying to deal with her own stuff and
yeah,
being back in a place that she isn't proud to be back in, the kind of is my tail between my legs and retreat kind of
yeah,
sentiment. So I
yeah,
think all of that comes together in a nice way. And again, that's part of what makes the Conjuring film so fascinating is that they start first by the foundation of a family
yeah,
or a group of people who are relatively close so that when bad things happen to them, you care about them as
yeah.
opposed to bad things just happen to these people. Sucks to be them?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're totally right. There's like with the Conjuring, there's like an emotional core that that he does such a great job of establishing before he does like the amazing horror stuff that it gets to.
And it works. And I would love that double feature. So if it ever happens, sign me up. But
I'm in. I'm in.
Will, Will, this has been a fantastic conversation. I could probably
Thanks.
talk to you for a lot longer. But for now, I want to remind everybody that The Confession is out now on VOD. You can see it on Apple, Fandango. You can rent it on YouTube, Google Play, all of those places. So please support it. And Will, not sure what you're up to next, but whatever it is, you've got a fan over at Macabre Daily. So
Uh,
appreciate your
you guys,
time.
you guys are awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. Man, it was great talking to you.
That's a pleasure, Will. Thank you.